What would you do if a little girl looked up at you with innocent, desperate eyes and asked, "Where can I buy a heart for my mom?" For Gabriel Foster, a billionaire CEO used to controlling every detail of his empire, this moment shattered everything he thought he knew about life and love. Standing in a sterile hospital corridor, far from his high-rise boardrooms, he faced the painful truth. The woman he once loved and walked away from was now fighting for her life, and the daughter he never knew he had was holding on to hope with a fragile grip. How do you make up for years lost? Can power and wealth ever truly heal the wounds of absence? And when the clock is ticking on a heart transplant, what sacrifices are we willing to make for family? This is not just a story about illness or money, it's about redemption, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to fight for those we love most when the odds seem impossible. If you want to join us on this emotional journey of love, loss, and hope, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of our heartfelt tales. Gabriel Foster didn't believe in fate, but there was something about that morning that unsettled him. Maybe it was the stubborn chill that lingered over Silver Springs in early April, or the way the clouds hovered low, pressing the mountain town into silence. Maybe it was the phone call from his assistant, reminding him, once again, that he was late for his own charity event. Or maybe it was just exhaustion, the kind that no amount of success or black coffee could fix. He parked his Tesla by the curb outside Starlight Memorial Hospital, staring for a long moment at the familiar letters over the sliding glass doors. There was a time, years ago, when he dreamed of leaving this town behind forever. Yet here he was, suited and tired, the CEO of Foster Logistics, billionaire on paper, just another man in a hospital parking lot, wondering what the day would take from him. Inside, the hospital lobby buzzed with controlled chaos. A volunteer in a cheery vest passed out visitor badges. An older man argued softly with a nurse over paperwork. Somewhere down the hall, a baby's cry echoed, sharp and raw. Gabriel took a breath, steadying himself. He was here for a purpose: to finalize a $1 million donation to the pediatric wing. Shake hands, take the photo, say a few words for the press. In and out. He checked his reflection in the elevator glass. Charcoal suit, perfect knot on his blue silk tie, but his eyes gave him away. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. He squared his shoulders, reminding himself, "You can handle anything. You always do." The receptionist smiled when he approached, but he barely noticed. "Mr. Foster, they're expecting you in the boardroom upstairs." He nodded, already scrolling through emails on his phone, but paused when a soft tug at his jacket sleeve broke his focus. He glanced down. Standing beside him was a little girl, no more than 6, looking up with a seriousness that startled him. She had wide gray eyes, framed by soft brown curls, and wore a faded pink jacket over a dress too thin for the cold. In her hands, she clutched a $5 bill creased and worn, the kind that had clearly changed hands 1,000 times. "Mister," she said, her voice tiny but clear, "where can I buy a heart for my mom?" The world seemed to hold its breath. Gabriel blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. What he managed, voice catching. "A heart," she repeated, lifting the bill with both hands. "My mom's is broken. The doctor said she needs a new one. I have $5. Is that enough?" Gabriel's throat tightened. All his practiced answers, his investor pitches, boardroom logic. The speech he'd rehearsed for today evaporated in an instant. He crouched down to her level, suddenly aware of the ache in his own chest. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Chloe? Chloe Bennett? She looked at him with a hope so fierce it almost hurt. Will you help me? For the first time in a long time? Gabriel didn't know what to say. He tried to steady his breathing. He wanted to offer comfort, to say something wise or reassuring, but all he managed was, I'll do my best. Chloe nodded, as if that settled things. She let go of his jacket and started walking away, then glanced back to make sure he was following. Gabriel hesitated, glancing at his phone. 5 new notifications, a text from his CFO, reminders piling up. But something deeper, something stubborn and human, pulled him after her. They moved through the lobby, past a row of vending machines and a mural painted with cartoon animals. Gabriel felt every stare as he followed Chloe, the suited executive trailing after a child. He tried to remember the last time he'd felt so out of place. He couldn't. Chloe led him down a hallway lined with cheerful posters about heart health and blood drives. The farther they walked, the quieter it grew, the distant sounds of the lobby fading into a hush, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the low voices of nurses. The hospital's pediatric wing was decorated with paper butterflies and painted clouds, but Gabriel sensed the undercurrent of fear and waiting that lingered beneath the bright colors. She stopped outside a door near the end of the hall. Through the glass panel, Gabriel saw a woman lying in a hospital bed, her skin pale, tangled blonde hair spread across the pillow, an oxygen mask covered her mouth and nose, and her chest rose and fell in shallow, uncertain waves. That's my mom, Chloe said, not quite whispering. Her name is Lauren. She sleeps a lot now, but I tell her stories so she doesn't get lonely. Gabriel stood frozen, his heart pounding. There was a painting taped to the wall beside the bed, a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a smiling sun. He swallowed, blinking back an ache he couldn't name. He wanted to ask questions about Lauren, about Chloe's father, about how long they'd been here. Instead, he said the only thing that felt right. Would it be okay if I sat with you for a while? Chloe nodded. She opened the door and slipped inside, moving with a careful quiet that spoke of weeks spent in hospital rooms. Gabriel followed, his expensive shoes suddenly too loud on the linoleum floor. The room was cool and filled with the steady hum of machines. Lauren's breathing was slow but steady. Chloe perched on the edge of a chair, swinging her legs. She took her mom's hand, small fingers wrapping gently around limp ones. She's the bravest person I know, Chloe said, glancing up at Gabriel. She tells me not to worry, but I know she's scared. Gabriel felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He, who commanded fleets of trucks, who'd faced down Wall Street titans, now found himself at a loss in the face of a little girl's faith. He sat down quietly beside her, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. For the first time all morning, he forgot about emails and appointments. All he saw was Chloe's hope and Lauren's fragile breath, and the $5 bill that lay, crumpled, on the bedside table, an offering as pure as any gift he'd ever received. Outside, the world rushed on. Inside, time seemed to pause. Gabriel looked at Chloe, at Lauren, and understood. Sometimes the greatest power you have is simply showing up. Sometimes that's where miracles begin. Gabriel Foster had always been told he was a man born for more. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived the hardest years life could give. But if anyone looked closer, they would see the shadows under his eyes, the tired way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was watching, the kind of exhaustion that wasn't about the hours you worked, but the years you carried. As he sat in the hard-backed hospital chair next to Chloe, the world outside the room faded. He could feel the thin pulse of uncertainty in the air. Even the steady rhythm of Lauren's heart monitor did little to calm the storm gathering in his mind. He tried not to stare at Lauren, even through the tubes and the paleness of her face. There was something about her that drew him in. She looked far younger than her 32 years, but so fragile now. Gabriel recognized a kind of strength in her, a resilience in the line of her jaw, even as she lay unconscious. He wondered what battles she had fought before landing here, at the mercy of beeping machines and a broken heart. Chloe hummed softly, tracing invisible shapes on her mother's blanket. She was so small, and yet there was a weight in her eyes, a patience that children weren't supposed to know. Gabriel had always believed himself to be strong, unshakable, in the eyes of the world, but seeing Chloe's silent vigil beside her mother humbled him in a way nothing in his career ever had. His mind wandered back to the previous night. Another late meeting at the Foster Logistics headquarters, this time with his board of directors. They were discussing expansion into new markets, running through slides, projections, legal risks. Gabriel had watched from the head of the table, but his thoughts had drifted. He had built this company from the ground up, brick by brick, year by year, always with a sense that something was just out of reach. For all the awards and magazine covers, he felt lonelier than ever, like a king in a high tower staring out at a world he could never touch. Success had a cost. In the beginning, it was just long hours, missed birthdays, the promises of "I'll make it up to you next weekend." But over time, the cost grew heavier, the empty apartments, the missed calls from friends he'd stopped calling back, the silence that met him at the end of every long day. His father, a machinist in a Denver factory, used to tell him, "You can have everything, son, but it'll never be enough if you've got nobody to share it with." Gabriel used to shrug that off. He was too busy chasing more to care what enough looked like. Now, sitting beside Chloe and Lauren, he felt the weight of that old advice pressing in on him. He wondered what it would be like to have a daughter who trusted him enough to ask for help with the most impossible thing in the world. He wondered what it would be like to have anyone need him, not for his money or power, but simply for who he was. Gabriel's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, the screen lighting up with messages from Mrs. Lambert, the hospital administrator, reminding him about the press conference and the donor luncheon. There were also 3 texts from his CFO and a string of emails marked urgent. He silenced the device and slipped it into his jacket pocket, feeling a pang of guilt. There was a time when nothing could have pried his attention away from his business. Now, all he wanted was to be present in this room, where something real was happening, something that money, for all its noise, could never buy. He watched as Chloe adjusted her mother's blanket, tucking it around Lauren's shoulders with practiced gentleness. "Do you want me to tell you the story again?" Mom Chloe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The one about the tree that grew hearts?" Gabriel felt a lump rise in his throat. Chloe didn't wait for an answer. She began to tell her story, voice steady, eyes bright. She spoke of a tree that lived in the center of a magic forest, a tree that grew hearts instead of fruit. People would come from far away, hoping to find the heart that would heal someone they loved. But the tree would only give a heart to those who truly believed. He listened, transfixed, as Chloe spun her story. He marveled at her hope, her creativity. It was a hope he remembered from his own childhood, before the world taught him to be cautious, to be hard. When she finished, she looked up at him. "Do you believe in magic trees. Mr. Foster? He paused, considering. I think I'd like to, he said softly. Sometimes I wish I did. Chloe smiled, her trust absolute. For her, belief was enough. Gabriel envied her. He stood and excused himself quietly, promising to return. In the hallway, the air felt different, colder. Nurses moved briskly from room to room, their faces practiced in compassion. But Gabriel saw the fatigue in their eyes, too. He walked past the window where families sat waiting, hope and fear mingling in the quiet between phone calls and coffee cups. He found himself in a quiet corner near the chapel, his thoughts tumbling. He thought about all the times he had told himself that he could fix anything if he just tried hard enough, worked long enough, spent enough. But this was something he couldn't control, couldn't solve with a wire transfer or phone call. It left him feeling exposed in a way that was almost unbearable. He remembered his mother's funeral, the cold ache of loss, the feeling of helplessness as the world went on around him. He had thrown himself into his work then, building walls so high that even he couldn't see over them. He wondered now if that was why he had never let anyone get close. If, deep down, he was still that scared boy, afraid of losing what little he had left. His phone rang, breaking the spell. It was Mrs. Lambert again. Mr. Foster, the luncheon is starting. They're waiting for your remarks. Gabriel hesitated. The world expected him to be the unbreakable CEO, the man who could handle anything. But in this moment, what mattered most was not a speech, not another handshake or another photo op. It was a little girl and her mother, fighting for another tomorrow. He returned to Chloe and Lauren's room, slipping inside just as a nurse was checking Lauren's chart. The nurse looked up and smiled at Chloe, then at Gabriel. Your mom's a fighter, she said softly. She's lucky to have you. Chloe smiled, her small hand never leaving her mother's. Gabriel watched them, feeling the slow shift inside himself, a movement he couldn't quite name. He sat down again, this time settling in as if he belonged there. For once, he let his mind rest. He listened to Chloe's stories, to the hum of the machines, to the hope that filled the room in quiet, persistent waves. Maybe, he thought, this was what his father had meant. Maybe this was the enough he'd been searching for. He looked at Chloe and promised himself, silently, that he would do whatever he could for her and for Lauren. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man who finally understood what it meant to show up for someone else. He felt the edges of his loneliness soften, replaced by a purpose he hadn't known he was missing. For the first time in a very long time, Gabriel Foster allowed himself to hope. Gabriel Foster woke early the next morning, long before the sun broke over the mountains, ringing Silver Springs. He'd slept in a hotel suite paid for by his company, the kind with blackout curtains and an espresso machine he never used. But he barely closed his eyes, mind looping through images of the night before Chloe's small hand, Lauren's ashen face, the way the hospital lights seemed to flicker with every uncertain heartbeat. He lay on the crisp white sheets staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what it felt like to sleep without worry clawing at his chest. He got up, showered, and dressed in silence. His phone was already lighting up with emails and reminders before he left the room, but he ignored them all. When he stepped into the morning chill, the world was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic and the distant song of a train. The walk from the hotel to Starlight Memorial Hospital was only 5 blocks. And for once, Gabriel didn't call for a car or let anyone know where he was going. He just walked, hands in his coat pockets, listening to the city wake up. The hospital at dawn was a different place. Gone was the daytime bustle and the cacophony of voices. replaced by a hush broken only by the soft sounds of cleaning carts, the shuffle of overnight nurses, and the muffled voices from the all-night ER. Gabriel moved through the lobby unnoticed, a tall, solitary man in a sea of morning shadows. He paused at the pediatric wing, his heart already picking up speed. Through the frosted glass doors, he could see the small playroom tucked just off the main corridor. Inside, Chloe was sitting cross-legged on a foam mat, bent over a coloring book. She wore the same pink jacket from the night before, her hair pulled into two uneven ponytails. Beside her, a stuffed bear with a missing button eye leaned precariously on a stack of picture books. Gabriel hesitated. He felt out of place, uncertain, like a guest in a world that operated by different rules. But Chloe looked up, spotted him, and her whole face brightened. "You came back," she said, voice clear in the quiet room. "Of course," Gabriel replied, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the heating vents. "I told you I would." He stepped inside and lowered himself to sit beside her. Chloe grinned and held out her coloring book for him to see. The page was filled with a lopsided heart drawn in red crayon, with 3 stick figures inside, one tall, one medium, one small, all smiling. At the top, in blocky letters, Chloe had written, "Our Family." Gabriel stared at the picture for a long moment. He swallowed hard. "That's beautiful," he managed, meaning it. Chloe nodded solemnly. "I draw one every day so Mom knows we're waiting for her to wake up." He glanced at the clock. Visiting hours wouldn't officially start for another hour, but Chloe didn't seem to care about rules. Neither did he. Not this morning. "Are you hungry?" Gabriel asked, glancing at the vending machine in the hallway. "I can go find you something to eat." Chloe shook her head. "Ms. Turner gave me a granola bar earlier. She's nice, but she smells like old flowers." Gabriel smiled despite himself. He watched as Chloe carefully packed her coloring book and bear into her backpack, then hopped up and reached for his hand. "Will you come see Mom with me?" He nodded, letting her lead the way down the corridor. Each step felt heavier as they approached Lauren's room. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, the space was dim except for the light from the window. Lauren lay just as before, pale and unmoving, her breathing slow but steady, the machines beside her bed quietly recording the rhythm of her fragile life. Chloe moved to her mother's side, climbing carefully into the chair and taking Lauren's hand. She looked up at Gabriel, as if inviting him to sit too. He took the seat across from Chloe, folding his hands in his lap, not sure what to do with them. For a while, there was only the soft hum of machines. Gabriel found himself studying Lauren's face, searching for signs of the woman she had been. He noticed the faint freckles on her cheeks, the curve of her jaw, the way her lips pressed together, even in sleep. There was beauty here, and something else, a kind of quiet endurance that spoke of battles fought out of sight. He wondered what her life had been before all this. Who had she been, aside from Chloe's mother? What dreams had she chased? What fears had she faced alone in the darkness? He glanced at Chloe, who was whispering softly, telling her mother about the drawing she'd made, about the bear who'd lost his eye, about the colors she would use tomorrow. Gabriel listened, struck by the gentleness in her voice, the careful way she spoke as if every word might help anchor Lauren to the world. After a while, a nurse entered the room. She was young, with bright blue eyes and a badge that read, Maya. She checked Lauren's vitals, smiling reassuringly at Chloe. "How's your mom doing today?" "Sweetheart," Maya asked, adjusting the IV line. "She's still sleepy," Chloe replied. but I drew her a picture." "That's wonderful," Maya said, taping the drawing to the wall where Lauren could see it when she woke. She glanced at Gabriel. "Are you family?" He hesitated, uncertain how to answer. Before he could reply, Chloe piped up, "This is my friend, Mr. Foster. He's helping us find a heart for Mom." Maya smiled at him, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "We're all hoping for good news," she said quietly. After the nurse left, Gabriel turned to Chloe. "Do you know what's wrong with your mom?" Chloe nodded. "She has a broken heart. That's what Dr. Reed said. But not the kind you get from being sad. It's the kind that makes you tired all the time and hurts when you breathe." Gabriel felt a surge of sorrow, mingled with admiration. Chloe was so young, but she understood more than he would have thought possible. "Do you ever get scared?" he asked softly. "Sometimes," Chloe admitted. "But Mom says when you're scared, you just hold on to the people who love you." She squeezed her mother's hand tighter, as if proving the point. Gabriel thought of all the times he'd been afraid in his own life, of the way he'd buried his fear beneath work and ambition. He wondered what might have been different if he'd had someone to hold on to. The day drifted by in a series of quiet moments. Nurses came and went, checking Lauren's vitals, bringing new charts. "Ms. Turner stopped in to check on Chloe, her perfume lingering long after she left. "Mrs. Lambert called Gabriel twice, insisting he return to the boardroom for the press conference. Each time, Gabriel told her he was busy and hung up, feeling the world outside these hospital walls grow less and less important. Chloe dozed in the chair beside her mother, curled up with her bear. Gabriel sat with them, his mind swirling with questions and regrets. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. Money felt meaningless here, useless in the face of illness and time. In the late afternoon, Dr. Samuel Reed arrived. He was a tall, serious man with a kind face, his hair streaked with gray. He greeted Chloe warmly, then turned to Gabriel. "You must be Mr. Foster," he said, extending a hand. "Chloe's told me about you." Gabriel shook his hand, feeling the doctor's steady grip. "I just want to help," he said. "Doctor?" Reed nodded. "I'll be honest with you. Lauren's condition is critical. She's on the transplant list, but O-negative hearts are rare. And even if a donor is found, she'll need to be strong enough for surgery." Gabriel felt the old urge to bargain, to offer resources, to find a solution. "Is there anything I can do? Any way to move things along?" "To what?" Reed hesitated, glancing at Chloe before answering. "There are rules, and a lot of people waiting. But if you want to help, be here for Chloe. That's what she needs most right now." Gabriel looked at the little girl asleep in her chair, her small hand wrapped around her mother's. He understood. Then, what Dr. Reed meant. Some things couldn't be solved with power or money. Some things just required presence and patience and hope. He stayed until the sun set, the room bathed in gold and soft shadow. As evening deepened, Gabriel promised Chloe he'd return the next day, and meant it. He left the hospital with a heart heavier than before, but steadier somehow. For the first time, he felt that he belonged in this story not as a savior, but as someone willing to try. The days at Starlight Memorial Hospital began to run together, each one marked by the same routines and the same fragile hope. Gabriel Foster came every morning just after sunrise, sometimes with coffee and muffins from the bakery across the street, sometimes with nothing but his presence. The hospital staff had stopped questioning his visits. Chloe, with her trusting smile and steady gaze, seemed to treat him as if he were family. Sometimes Gabriel wondered what it might feel like to really belong somewhere, not just in a boardroom or on a magazine cover, but in the simple, everyday spaces where love and loss lived side by side. Lauren Bennett's room had become its own quiet world. Each day, Gabriel sat with Chloe and watched the play of sunlight on the sterile white sheets, listened to the soft whir of machines, and tried to ignore the fear that crept in around the edges. Sometimes Lauren would stir, her eyelids fluttering, her hand twitching in Chloe's grasp. But she never fully woke, never spoke, never saw the drawings Chloe taped to the wall or the fresh flowers Gabriel brought each afternoon. Still, Chloe talked to her mother constantly, stories about the nurses, about the tree outside her window, about the time Gabriel nearly dropped an entire tray of Jell-O trying to make her laugh. It was in these slow, tender days that Gabriel began to learn who Lauren had been before illness claimed so much of her. He pieced together details from Chloe's stories, from the old photographs clipped to the corkboard above the bed, and from conversations with the people who wandered in and out of the hospital room. There was Lauren as a child, grinning in a faded soccer jersey, her knee bandaged, holding a trophy almost as big as she was. Lauren the art teacher, standing in front of a mural with streaks of blue and yellow paint on her jeans. Lauren holding a newborn Chloe, her hair wild, her smile tired but radiant. One afternoon, as Gabriel was arranging a vase of daisies on the windowsill, a woman slipped into the room. She was tall and thin, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, her eyes rimmed with fatigue and something harder to name. Chloe looked up and grinned. "Aunt Jade." "You came." The woman knelt to hug Chloe, her face softening for a moment. Then she straightened and looked at Gabriel, sizing him up with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "I'm Jade Bennett," she said, offering a brisk handshake. "Lauren's sister." Gabriel nodded. "Gabriel Foster. I've just been trying to help." Jade's gaze lingered on him, her posture stiff. She glanced at the flowers, the drawings, the half-empty coffee cups. "It's good of you to be here," she said, but her voice held a note of caution. "Chloe needs all the support she can get right now." He could tell she wanted to say more, but was holding back in front of Chloe. When Chloe wandered over to the window to look for birds, Jade leaned in, her voice low. "I know who you are. Mr. Foster. I saw your face in the news when you made that donation last year. I'm grateful for whatever kindness you've shown Chloe. But you should know Lauren hasn't had an easy life. She's always tried to do things the hard way, the right way. She never asked for help from anyone, especially not from people with money." Gabriel stiffened a little. "I'm not here as a CEO," he said quietly. "I'm here because I care." Jade searched his face, looking for cracks in the armor. She seemed about to say more, but just nodded and turned away. Later. As Chloe napped in the chair, Gabriel stepped into the hallway and found Jade at the water fountain. He hesitated, then spoke. "I want to help your sister," he said. "Not just with money. I want to give Chloe hope. I want Lauren to have a chance." Jade crossed her arms, her voice tinged with an old hurt. "Lauren and we grew up poor. Our parents died when we were teenagers. Lauren took care of me. She never had much. When she found out she was pregnant with Chloe, the father was already gone. She worked 2 jobs, went back to school, made a life for them with nothing but grit. She never accepted handouts. If she wakes up, she'll want to fight this on her own terms." Gabriel felt a pang of guilt. He thought of all the times he'd used his influence to open doors, to make things easier for himself and others. Here, he was powerless, a visitor in someone else's battle. Jade studied him for a moment. "I don't know what you're looking for here. Mr. Foster? Maybe you're trying to make up for something. Maybe you're just kind. But this isn't a story you get to fix. It's Chloe's story. It's Lauren's." He nodded. "I know. I want to be part of it. If you'll let me." She looked away, blinking fast. "Chloe's lucky to have you around," she said finally. "Just don't promise her miracles you can't deliver." That night, Gabriel sat alone in the hospital chapel, the quiet space filled with the golden glow of candles. He thought about Lauren, about her stubborn courage, her refusal to give up. He thought about Jade, her fierce loyalty, her bitterness. Most of all, he thought about Chloe, curled up beside her mother, trusting him with a kind of love he hadn't known he was capable of giving or receiving. He found himself remembering another time, years ago, when he and Lauren had crossed paths as young adults. It was at a friend's gallery opening, long before he became the man with the suit and the title. Lauren had been painting a mural on the side of the building. She'd laughed at something he said, the sound bright and unburdened. For a few weeks, they'd talked, shared coffee, dreams, insecurities. But then Gabriel's career had called him away first to Denver, then to New York, chasing contracts and partnerships and all the promises of success. He hadn't thought about Lauren in years, not really, not until he saw Chloe's face and felt that shock of recognition, the way her eyes crinkled at the edges, just like Lauren's. Now, faced with the reality of Lauren's illness, Gabriel was haunted by the choices he'd made, what he'd left behind, in pursuit of more. He wondered if Lauren would forgive him for not being there, for not looking back. He wondered if, deep down, he was really just trying to atone for those lost years. One evening, as he read quietly to Chloe from a book of fairy tales, Lauren's breathing changed. It grew shallower, rougher. Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom," she whispered. Gabriel called for a nurse, panic surging through him. "Doctor!" Reed arrived within minutes, checking Lauren's vitals, adjusting her oxygen. He spoke quietly to Gabriel and Chloe, explaining that Lauren's heart was growing weaker. There was nothing more they could do for now but wait for a miracle. As the sun slipped behind the mountains, painting the sky with streaks of violet and rose, Gabriel sat beside Chloe, holding her hand. He watched the last light fade from the room and made a silent promise to Chloe, to Lauren, to himself. He would stay. He would hope. Even when hope felt impossible, he would fight for a miracle, not with money, but with the simple, stubborn act of love. Gabriel Foster was no stranger to negotiating with power. He had built his fortune out of deals made in glass towers and boardrooms, where every favor, every handshake, had a price. He'd learned early that, in America, doors swung open for those who could pay the price or knew the right people. But nothing in his storied career had prepared him for the brutal indifference of a hospital's waiting list, or the way the lives of strangers hung in the balance, measured out in cold, bureaucratic numbers. Each day, Gabriel made his way through the hallways of Starlight Memorial Hospital, moving between Lauren's room, the nurse's station, and the administrative offices. He noticed details he had never cared about before: the faded corners of the waiting room carpet, the chipped linoleum tiles, the tired faces of staff who worked double shifts for half the money their work deserved. He carried the weight of his own helplessness like a stone in his chest. On paper, Gabriel Foster was a man with almost unlimited means, but in the hospital system, all the money in the world could not change the laws of organ donation. the scarcity of O-negative hearts, or the protocols meant to protect fairness in the most unfair of situations. He found himself in Mrs. Lambert's office more than once, sitting across from the hospital administrator with his hands folded tightly in his lap. She was a woman who wore her authority like armor, always perfectly put together, her hair pinned back so tightly it never moved. She greeted Gabriel politely, but her tone always remained clipped, her eyes sharp with calculation. "Mr. Foster, I appreciate your generosity to the hospital." "Mrs." Lambert said, "but transplant policy is not up for negotiation. There are protocols, and they exist for a reason. Every patient on that list is someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's child." Gabriel wanted to argue, to insist, but he could see it would get him nowhere. He tried different tactics, asking about private options, international clinics, even experimental procedures. For each question, Mrs. Lambert had a carefully prepared answer, as if she'd faced men like him before, powerful, desperate, and used to getting their way. He left her office feeling smaller each time, the burden of failure heavy on his shoulders. In the hallway, nurses gave him kind looks, but never offered false hope. The system was working as designed. Sometimes, he thought, the system was the enemy. At night. Gabriel returned to his hotel room and stared at the ceiling, remembering all the times in his life when he'd simply refused to accept defeat. He had grown up poor, watched his father lose his job to a factory closure, watched his mother ration food so he and his siblings could eat. That kind of hunger left a mark on a man. It made Gabriel promise himself he would never be powerless again. He picked up his phone and began making calls, reaching out to contacts across the country, old college friends, business partners, even a senator who owed him a favor. Each time, the conversation ended in the same way. "There are limits to what money can buy, even for someone like you. The transplant registry, the allocation rules, the ethical boards. These were walls no one could break through." Sometimes, in the quiet moments between meetings and phone calls, Gabriel wondered if this was what true powerlessness felt like. It was not just being unable to buy a solution, but the sharp realization that fate could not be bargained with, that fairness was not always found in the rules. He thought of Chloe's hopeful eyes and Lauren's quiet fight. He wondered if his presence alone, his willingness to show up, to care, was enough to tip the scales. The next day, Gabriel arrived early with breakfast sandwiches for Chloe and Jade. He found Jade in the hallway, pacing with her arms folded tight across her chest. She gave him a nod but said nothing as he handed her coffee. "Thank you," she muttered, the words almost grudging. Gabriel hesitated, then spoke quietly. "How are you holding up?" Jade shrugged. "I'm just tired. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what comes next. If Lauren doesn't get a heart in time." She trailed off, the words too heavy to finish. Gabriel reached out, touching her shoulder gently. "I'm not giving up," he said. "We'll find a way." Jade glanced at him, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I know you want to help, Gabriel, but there are things you can't fix. My sister, she always believed if you just worked hard enough, you could change your life. I don't know if that's true anymore." He saw her struggle with her own helplessness, a mirror to his own. He realized then that sometimes being strong meant admitting you were scared, that loving someone meant letting yourself be vulnerable. He wished he could promise Jade that everything would be all right, but he knew better than to make promises he might not be able to keep. Later, in Lauren's room, Chloe was busy building a tower of plastic blocks by the window, her brow furrowed in concentration. Lauren lay still, her face peaceful but distant, as if she were floating somewhere between dreams and the world. Gabriel sat beside Chloe, watching her carefully balance another block atop her growing tower. "Do you want to be an engineer someday?" he teased, hoping to make her smile. Chloe shook her head, her mouth twisting into a thoughtful frown. "No, I want to be a heart doctor. Like Dr. Reed. I want to help people like Mom." He smiled, touched by the determination in her voice. "That's a good dream. Chloe, the world could use more people like you." She looked up at him, her eyes suddenly serious. "Are you going to help my mom, Mr. Foster? You're important. Right. Important people can do big things." Gabriel felt the weight of her belief press down on him. He wanted to answer yes, but the words caught in his throat. "Instead," he said softly, "I'm trying. Chloe, I'm trying as hard as I can." She nodded, accepting his answer with a faith that made Gabriel's heart ache. For the first time, he realized that what mattered most to Chloe was not whether he succeeded or failed, but that he was trying at all. That evening, Dr. Reed stopped by the room, his face lined with exhaustion. He pulled Gabriel aside in the hallway, his voice low and grave. "Lauren's heart is failing faster than we hoped," he said. "She's getting weaker, and soon she may not be strong enough to survive surgery if a donor's found. I'm doing everything I can. I know you are, too." Gabriel thanked him, his voice thick with gratitude and fear. After the doctor left, Gabriel leaned against the wall, his hands shaking. He felt the world closing in, the old fear of loss pressing at his chest. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen, desperate for a solution, but no message, no contact, no bank account could help him now. For the first time in years, Gabriel felt truly alone with his worries. That night, unable to sleep, he walked the empty hospital corridors, passing through shafts of fluorescent light and shadow. He watched other families huddled in waiting rooms, mothers crying softly, fathers staring blankly at the wall, children sleeping on benches. He understood their pain, their longing for a miracle. He stopped by the chapel again, the air filled with the faint scent of wax and lilies. He sat in the back pew, his hands clasped, and closed his eyes. He thought of his parents, of Lauren, of Chloe and Jade. He thought about the fragility of time, how easily life could change with a single phone call, a diagnosis, a chance encounter. For a long time, Gabriel sat in silence, wrestling with the limits of power and the meaning of hope. He had built his life on control and strategy, but now he faced a future he could not predict or shape. He wondered if this was what faith meant, holding on, even when there was no guarantee of a happy ending. Before dawn, he returned to Lauren's room. Chloe was sleeping beside her mother, her small hand curled around Lauren's fingers. Gabriel sat quietly by the window, watching the first hints of morning light break over the mountains. He made a vow, silent but fierce. He would not abandon them. He would fight for Lauren, for Chloe, for the chance at a different ending, even if the system refused him, even if fate dealt its hardest hand. He would be there, because sometimes the truest power was not in what you could buy, but in what you refused to give up on. A cold spring rain fell over Silver Springs as Gabriel Foster made his way to Starlight Memorial Hospital. Droplets streaked the windshield, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and neon. Gabriel barely noticed the storm. His mind spun with numbers, possibilities, prayers he did not quite believe in. Every hour felt heavier, the ticking of the clock a quiet threat in the back of his mind. He stopped at the bakery and bought cinnamon rolls, remembering how Chloe's eyes lit up at the sweet smell. He had come to know her favorite things: apples, pink hair ties, stories about astronauts. He never thought he would learn the routines of a child so quickly. He also never thought he would find himself measuring his days by the sound of her laughter or the hush that filled a hospital room after midnight. Inside, the hospital felt different in the rain, quieter, more introspective. Chloe met him in the hallway, a flash of color in her yellow raincoat, her feet splashing in imaginary puddles. She grinned when she saw him, the weight of her mother's illness momentarily forgotten. "You're early," Chloe exclaimed. "I saved you a seat by the window." She reached for his hand and led him through the pediatric wing, past rooms filled with cartoons and stacks of board games. The staff knew him now. Nurses greeted him by name, and even Mrs. Lambert, the hospital administrator, seemed to soften when he walked by. Gabriel had long been wary of places where everyone knew his name, but here it felt right, as if he had earned his place simply by refusing to leave. They arrived at Lauren's room. Jade was already there, holding a mug of tea, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. She offered Gabriel a tired smile, the tension between them easing over days of shared worry. Chloe climbed onto the windowsill and peered outside, drawing shapes in the condensation with her finger. "Is it going to rain all day?" she asked. Gabriel glanced out, thinking of how the world could look so different from inside these walls. "Maybe," he replied, "or maybe it'll stop when the sun decides to come out again." Chloe considered that, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. "I hope it stops soon. Mom likes the sun." Lauren lay still, her breathing shallow, but her face looked less strained than the day before. "Doctor?" Reed had adjusted her medications, hoping to keep her strong enough for the chance of a donor heart. Gabriel had learned to watch for small changes, a touch more color in her cheeks, the way her fingers sometimes twitched when Chloe held her hand. Jade sat beside her sister, talking softly about old memories. "Remember when we got lost in the corn maze?" she said, her voice breaking on the edges. "You wouldn't let go of my hand for an hour, even though you were scared. You said, 'If we stick together, nothing bad can find us.'" Gabriel watched them, feeling a pang of regret for all the years he'd spent running from connection. He realized how much of life was lived in these small, ordinary moments: the comfort of a voice, the squeeze of a hand, the promise to stay. After lunch, Dr. Reed came in with a stack of charts and a cautious smile. "I have some news," he said, and Gabriel felt his breath catch. "Doctor?" Reed explained that a new program had launched in Switzerland, a clinical trial using a revolutionary artificial heart, designed for patients with rare blood types. Only a handful of these surgeries had been performed, but early results were promising. The team in Zurich had reviewed Lauren's case, and if she could be stabilized enough for transport, she might qualify for the procedure. Gabriel felt hope spark inside him, bright and terrifying. "What would it take?" he asked. "How quickly can we move, Doctor?" Reed was honest. The logistics would be complex. Lauren would need a medical flight, special permissions, and continuous care throughout the journey. The operation itself was high risk, and the decision to move her would have to be made quickly. If Lauren got any weaker, travel would become impossible. Chloe looked between the adults, confusion knitting her brows. "What does it mean?" she whispered. Jade crouched beside her niece, explaining gently. "The doctors want to try a new kind of surgery that could help Mom. but we'd have to take her far away, to a place with special doctors. Chloe's eyes widened, her fear mixing with cautious excitement. Can we all go together? Gabriel nodded, reaching for her hand. Yes, Chloe. We'll go together. We'll do everything we can. The next hours became a whirlwind. Gabriel called his team, activating every connection, every resource. Within hours, he had arranged for a private air ambulance, staffed with doctors who specialized in critical care. Mrs. Lambert handled the hospital paperwork, her professionalism finally bending to the urgency of the situation. Jade began packing Lauren's things, a photo of Chloe, a faded blanket, the stack of drawings that had covered the walls. Gabriel moved through it all with an energy born of fear and hope. He signed forms, gave orders, and checked every detail twice. He found himself thinking not like a CEO, but like a father, a protector, desperate for one more chance. As night fell, Gabriel sat by Lauren's bed, holding her hand and speaking softly, as if his words alone could will her back to them. You're almost there. Lauren, just a little farther. Hold on, please. He felt Jade's presence beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. Thank you for not giving up, she said quietly. I know this hasn't been easy for you either. Gabriel shook his head. I've spent most of my life thinking I could fix anything if I just tried hard enough. But sometimes you have to accept help. Sometimes you just have to hope. He looked at Lauren, then at Chloe, and realized how much he wanted this second chance, not just for Lauren, but for himself. Later that evening, the air ambulance crew arrived. The team moved with quiet confidence, carefully preparing Lauren for transport. Chloe clung to Gabriel, her small fingers trembling. Will Mom be scared? She asked. Gabriel knelt to look her in the eyes. She might be, Chloe, but we'll be right there with her the whole time. He felt the old ache of loss stirring in his chest, but he pressed it down. He refused to let fear steal this chance. They watched as Lauren was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, her face serene beneath a tangle of hair. The paramedics spoke in soft voices, checking monitors, adjusting IV lines. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle as they made their way outside. Chloe gripped Gabriel's hand tightly, her face pale but determined. Jade carried Lauren's bag and a small stuffed bear, pressing both close as if they might protect her sister from the unknown. At the airport, the air ambulance waited with engines humming. Gabriel climbed aboard last, sitting beside Chloe and Jade as the team finished securing Lauren for the journey. The plane took off into the night, climbing above the clouds until the city below was nothing but scattered lights. Chloe leaned against Gabriel, her head heavy on his shoulder. She closed her eyes, trusting him to keep her safe. Gabriel gazed out the window, his heart filled with equal parts dread and hope. He did not know what awaited them in Switzerland, did not know if the promise of a new heart would be enough. But as the plane soared over the sleeping world, he made himself a promise. He would not let fear win. He would believe for Chloe, for Jade, for Lauren, and for himself. Because sometimes hope was all you had, and sometimes it was enough to carry you across an ocean. The world outside the windows of the air ambulance was a midnight blue streaked with clouds. Gabriel Foster had traveled in private jets and first-class cabins for decades, but nothing had ever felt like this, a flight not for deals or celebrations, but for a chance at life. The interior of the plane was cold and quiet, the space crowded with medical equipment and the steady, mechanical hum of monitors. Lauren Bennett lay strapped to a rolling ICU bed, her face pale but peaceful, her body a collection of wires and careful hope. Chloe sat next to Gabriel, a small blanket tucked under her chin, eyes wide in the dim light. Jade Bennett hovered protectively at Lauren's side, clutching a faded canvas bag with all the essentials she could carry. None of them spoke much during the flight. It was as if every word, every movement, might tip the balance between hope and disaster. At 30,000 feet, time warped. Gabriel watched the slow rise and fall of Lauren's chest. He counted every breath, every beep, waiting for signs of change. The medical team moved efficiently, checking oxygen, adjusting medicine, murmuring to each other in a blend of English and German. Every so often, one of them would look at Gabriel and Chloe, offering a brief smile as if to say, "We're doing everything we can." Gabriel wanted to believe them. He wanted to let go, even for a moment, of the tension that held him upright in his seat. Instead, he stared at the window, watching the world pass beneath them. The truth was, he'd never been good at letting others take the lead. His life had been one of taking action, of never sitting still. Now, all he could do was wait and pray, if praying was still something he knew how to do. Eventually, Chloe drifted to sleep, her head heavy against Gabriel's arm. He reached for a storybook she'd packed in her small backpack, flipping through the pages, reading the words to himself in a silent whisper. When was the last time he'd held a child while they slept? The memory flickered, distant and unfamiliar. He wondered if this was what fatherhood was meant to feel, like a combination of awe, fear, and the fierce need to protect. Jade was awake, watching him quietly from across the aisle. In the blue light of the cabin, she looked older, her face lined with exhaustion and responsibility. "Thank you, Gabriel," she whispered, careful not to wake Chloe, "for not giving up, for all of this." Gabriel shook his head. "I haven't done enough. I wish I could do more." Jade squeezed her sister's hand. "Sometimes being here is the most anyone can do. You didn't have to stay. Most people would have given up by now." Gabriel thought about that. He had spent his life building something so large, so important, but he could not remember the last time anyone had asked him to simply stay. The flight touched down in Zurich just after sunrise. The airport seemed impossibly clean and quiet, the air cold and clear as crystal. The Zurich Biomedical Institute was waiting with a fleet of ambulances. The doctors and nurses moved with practiced urgency, transferring Lauren to a gurney, checking her monitors, speaking to Chloe and Jade in gentle, accented English. Gabriel followed as they made their way through sliding glass doors and bright white corridors. The world outside the mountains, the early spring light, the city with its old stone bridges faded to a blur. Inside the hospital, everything felt clinical but not unkind. The staff spoke softly, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors. Dr. Matthias Engel was the first to introduce himself. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a manner that was both precise and warm. "Mr. Foster, Ms. Bennett, Chloe," he greeted, shaking hands. "We have reviewed Lauren's case closely. I know this journey has not been easy. We will take the utmost care with her." He explained the planned intensive observation for 24 hours. New scans, blood work, a series of tests to be sure Lauren was stable enough for the artificial heart surgery. If anything changed, the risks would be discussed, options reevaluated. Jade and Chloe settled into a small suite next to Lauren's new hospital room. The windows looked out over the snow-capped Alps. Chloe pressed her face to the glass, awestruck by the distant peaks. "Do you think Mom will see the mountains?" she asked Gabriel. "I think she will," he answered softly, kneeling beside her. "And I think when she does, she'll say she wants to paint them." He meant it. He had come to believe in Lauren's stubborn ability to find color even in the darkest times. While Lauren was wheeled away for more scans, Gabriel met with Dr. Engel and his team in a conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and clean linen. They explained the risks in careful, deliberate English. The procedure was groundbreaking, but new. 5 patients had survived. 2 had not. No one with Lauren's preoperative complications had tried it yet. Gabriel signed the forms with steady hands, his heart a knot of fear and hope. He knew what was at stake. He remembered Chloe's question. "Are you important? Do important people always win?" and realized that the answer had nothing to do with money or power or even luck. It had to do with staying, with trying, with believing in the possibility of another sunrise. The next hours blurred together. Gabriel watched over Chloe while Jade met with social workers and hospital liaisons. They navigated language barriers, time zone changes, and the constant worry that the window for surgery might close at any moment. Gabriel stayed up most of the night, pacing the hallway, listening to the wind outside and the even softer sound of Chloe's breathing in the next room. Just before dawn, Dr. Engel returned. Lauren was stable, he said. The surgery would begin within the hour. Chloe clung to Gabriel, trembling with fear. "Is Mom going to die?" she whispered. Gabriel wrapped his arms around her, feeling the sharp ache of her question. "I don't know, Chloe, but I do know that if love could fix everything, your mom would be safe already. All we can do is hope and believe." Jade knelt and joined them, her hand resting on Chloe's back. "We'll be right here." "Okay, no matter what." The surgical team arrived. Lauren was wheeled away, a flurry of white coats and gentle hands. Gabriel and the others were led to a private waiting room with wide windows overlooking the mountains. The world outside was waking up, the sun creeping over the peaks, painting everything in gold and blue. They waited. Minutes became hours. Nurses came and went, bringing updates, water, encouragement, but never certainty. Chloe drew pictures on the window with a marker, mountains and hearts, her mother always smiling. Jade made calls to friends back home, her voice steady even as her hands shook. Gabriel sat between them, not as a CEO, not as the man with answers, but as someone holding on to hope with everything he had. He found himself remembering his own childhood, the fear of hospitals, the prayers whispered into pillows, the stubborn refusal to believe that the world could take someone you loved and never give them back. He looked at Chloe and Jade and Lauren and realized that all his life he had been running towards something he could never name. Until now. In the end, hope was not about winning or losing. It was about showing up, about waiting, about refusing to give up. He watched the sun rise higher over the Alps, filling the room with light, and for the first time in weeks, Gabriel allowed himself to believe that miracles, however fragile, were possible. The hours after Lauren was taken into surgery seemed to stretch and bend, warping time in a way that only happens when the future hangs in the balance. The waiting room at the Zurich Biomedical Institute was nothing like the one back in Colorado here. The windows reached from floor to ceiling, framing the snowy Alps in the distance. The chairs were comfortable, upholstered in gentle blue. There were fresh flowers on the side table, and the faint sound of classical music drifting from somewhere unseen. But none of that made the waiting easier. Gabriel Foster paced the room for what felt like an eternity. Every so often, he would stop at the window, trying to lose himself in the view. But the beauty outside only made the fear inside more acute. He turned back to see Jade seated with Chloe on her lap, reading quietly from one of Chloe's favorite storybooks. Chloe clung to her aunt, her eyes glazed and distant, as if she were drifting between worlds. "It's going to be okay," Jade whispered, smoothing Chloe's hair. Gabriel wished he could promise the same. Instead, he walked to the small kitchenette and poured himself a cup of coffee, staring into the swirling blackness as if it might offer answers. He thought about all the things he might say if the worst happened, but every word felt useless. He'd faced hostile takeovers, seen millions of dollars vanish in the space of a phone call. He'd been strong for others his entire life, but this was different. This was the kind of fear that left a person raw, stripped bare. Hours passed. Nurses came by periodically with updates. The surgery is progressing, one would say, always with a kind, professional smile. Dr. Engel is confident. She's stable so far. Each time, Gabriel's heart lurched a little, caught between hope and the instinct to brace for loss. Eventually, Chloe fell asleep, her head heavy on Jade's shoulder. Jade herself looked as if she were unraveling at the seams, her eyes red from crying, her lips pressed into a thin line. Gabriel sat beside her and placed a tentative hand on her back. "You don't have to hold it together all the time," he said gently. Jade laughed softly, the sound edged with exhaustion. "If I don't, who will she?" Looked at Gabriel, her expression suddenly raw. "All my life, Lauren's been the strong one. She took care of me after our parents died. She worked 2 jobs, made sure I got through school, never let me see how scared she was. Now it's my turn, and I feel like I'm failing her." Gabriel squeezed her shoulder. "You're not failing. You're here. That's what matters." Jade let her head drop forward, her tears falling silently. Gabriel watched her and realized how much courage it took to love someone this fiercely, to stand beside them when you had no power to change the outcome. He wondered if that was what his own parents had felt when he was sick as a child, or if it was something you only understood when you grew older and the world lost its sharp edges. When a nurse appeared again, Gabriel rose quickly, searching her face for news. "The doctor will be out soon," she said. She offered a reassuring smile and left again. Chloe woke, rubbing her eyes, disoriented. "Is it over? Is Mom better? Not yet." "Sweetie," Jade said softly, "but soon." Gabriel sat with Chloe and told her a story about a little girl who lived at the foot of a mountain. How she dreamed of flying above the clouds. How she was braver than she realized. Chloe listened, her head resting on Gabriel's arm. He thought of how easily children trusted, how they carried hope like a lantern in the dark. He found himself reflecting on his own journey on the business deals that had made headlines. The nights alone in luxury hotels. The boardrooms full of people who feared him, but never really knew him. He thought of the emptiness that had followed each triumph, the feeling that nothing was ever enough. Now, in this waiting room, surrounded by the sounds of other families whispering, crying, or praying, Gabriel realized how much he'd missed by keeping himself at arm's length. He wished he could go back and do things differently, call his parents more often, reach out to old friends, hold on tighter to the people who mattered. A sudden memory surfaced the day he first met Lauren. She had paint on her hands and a laugh that made him feel like the world was full of possibility. He'd admired her resilience, the way she could find beauty anywhere. He wondered now if he'd ever really deserved her, if he was capable of being the kind of man she needed. The door opened. "Doctor?" Engel entered, still in his scrubs, his face drawn with fatigue, but illuminated by a rare, genuine smile. She made it through the surgery. Dr. Engel announced quietly. The artificial heart is functioning. Lauren is stable. The next 72 hours are critical. But this is what we hoped for. Jade gasped, a sob escaping before she could stop it. Chloe stared up at Dr. Engel, wide-eyed. Can I see her? She asked. Dr. Engel knelt down so he was eye level with Chloe. Not yet, little one. She needs to rest, but you can draw her a picture for when she wakes up. Chloe nodded solemnly, already searching for her colored pencils. Gabriel felt his knees nearly buckle as the tension left his body in a wave. He found himself shaking, the emotion threatening to spill over. He moved to the window, gripping the cool glass, watching the sun edge its way above the mountains. For the first time in weeks, he let himself breathe. Jade hugged Chloe tightly, her voice trembling. Thank you. God, thank you. Dr. Engel laid a gentle hand on Gabriel's arm. We're not out of danger yet, but your friend is strong. Sometimes that makes all the difference. Gabriel nodded, swallowing back tears. Thank you, Doctor, for everything. They spent the rest of the night in a day's relief mixing with exhaustion, gratitude blending with fear of what still lay ahead. Chloe drew a picture of 3 stick figures under a rainbow. Her mother at the center, smiling. Jade called friends back home, her voice stronger than before. Gabriel sat alone for a while, watching the colors shift on the mountains, thinking about the things he wanted to say to Lauren if she woke up, the apologies, the promises, the hope for something better than what they'd left behind. He realized that love was not a guarantee. It was a decision, a choice to show up, to keep hoping, to hold on when everything else seemed lost. In the quiet that followed the chaos, Gabriel let himself hope. He whispered silent promises to the dawn. If she wakes up, if she comes back, I won't waste this chance. I'll show her, and Chloe, and Jade, what it means to stay. He fell asleep in a chair, the first real sleep he'd had in weeks, dreaming of mountain light and new beginnings. The world outside the Zurich Biomedical Institute woke gently, pale light brushing the rooftops and distant peaks, but inside the recovery wing, the hours stretched thin and taut. Gabriel Foster awoke in a chair, a stiff ache in his back, the unfamiliar weight of hope and fear still pressing on his chest. He blinked away dreams and looked across the room at Jade Bennett, who had drifted off beside Chloe. The little girl lay curled up in a blanket, one hand still clutching a crayon drawing a rainbow, a heart, a stick figure family with Lauren in the center. Lauren, the reason all of them were here, thousands of miles from home. For a moment, Gabriel let himself believe it had all been a nightmare, the meetings, the long flight, the terrifying surgery. But then he heard the beeping of monitors, the gentle shuffle of nurses' shoes, and remembered this was real. Lauren was alive, but her life hung in a delicate balance. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Chloe, and moved into the corridor. The hospital at sunrise was a different place, full of cautious optimism and soft voices. He found Dr. Engel at the nurses' station, reading overnight reports. "Good morning, Mr. Foster," the surgeon greeted, offering a tired but hopeful smile. "Lauren is holding steady. Her new heart is functioning well so far. No signs of rejection. The next 48 hours are crucial, but this is what we wanted to see." Gabriel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you, Doctor. I can't tell you how much this means. Doctor." Engel gave a gentle nod, placing a reassuring hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "You all did your part, too. Don't underestimate hope." Back in the waiting room, Chloe was awake, her hair mussed, blinking sleepily. She looked at Gabriel, searching his face for answers. "Is Mom okay?" she whispered, almost afraid to hope. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "She's doing better. Chloe, the doctors say the new heart is working, but we have to be patient. She needs lots of rest." Chloe nodded, her fingers tracing patterns in the blanket. "Can I give her my drawing now?" "Not yet," Gabriel said gently. "Soon. Why don't we make her another one? Maybe a picture of the mountains. When she wakes up, she'll know we were here." Chloe's face brightened, and she pulled out her colored pencils. Jade, roused by their voices, offered a tired smile and squeezed Gabriel's hand. For the first time, relief outshone fear in her eyes. They spent the morning in quiet routines, drawing, reading, calling family back in Colorado. News traveled quickly. Friends sent messages of encouragement, promising prayers, donations to the clinic, anything to help. Gabriel responded to a few texts from his business partners, but most of the world faded away. His attention was here, on this small, saved, fragile family, on the hope blooming between uncertainty. When Dr. Engel finally allowed them into Lauren's room, Chloe's hand shook with excitement and nerves. Lauren was propped up slightly, pale but conscious, eyes fluttering open as they entered. Monitors beeped softly, an IV dripped beside the bed, and the mechanical whir of the artificial heart pulsed like a steady drumbeat in the quiet. Lauren's gaze moved slowly across the room, settling on Chloe first, then Jade, then Gabriel. Tears glimmered in her eyes. "Hi, Mom," Chloe said, barely above a whisper. Lauren's lips curved into a faint, trembling smile. "Hi, sweetheart." Jade hurried to her side, taking Lauren's hand, her own tears falling freely. "You scared us," she whispered, voice thick with relief and grief. Lauren squeezed her sister's fingers weakly. "I'm sorry," she managed. "Did I miss anything important?" The laughter that bubbled up was ragged but genuine. Chloe clambered up to the edge of the bed and placed her newest drawing next to Lauren's pillow. A mountain scene, the sun shining bright, 3 figures holding hands. "This is us," she said proudly. "So you know we were here." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful. Honey, thank you." Gabriel stood at the end of the bed, hands awkwardly clasped. Lauren's eyes found his, searching, and he felt all the apologies he'd practiced catch in his throat. Instead, he just said, "I'm glad you're back." She looked at him for a long, silent moment, then nodded. "Me too." The rest of the visit was brief. The doctors limited Lauren's stimulation to preserve her energy, but even those few minutes meant everything. When the nurse gently ushered them out, Chloe pressed her face to Lauren's hand, unwilling to let go. Outside in the hallway, Jade hugged Gabriel, her composure finally breaking. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling, "for everything. We couldn't have done this without you." Gabriel shook his head, tears threatening in his own eyes. "I just did what anyone would do." Jade wiped her face, managing a laugh. Not everyone would fly halfway across the world or sleep in a waiting room for a month. They sat together for a while, watching Chloe color another picture for Lauren. The adrenaline that had kept them going began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and tentative relief. That afternoon, Gabriel slipped away for a walk through the hospital's garden. The air was cool, filled with the scent of damp earth and early flowers. He thought about all the nights he'd spent alone in hotel rooms, chasing a version of success that never seemed to fill the ache inside. He thought about the way Lauren had looked at Chloe, the fierce love in Jade's voice, the silent promises they had all made to one another. He realized then that family was not built on blood or perfection, but on presence, on the willingness to stay through fear and uncertainty, to show up even when you had nothing left to give. As the day faded into evening, the medical team checked Lauren's progress. Her numbers remained stable. Dr. Engel visited again, sharing cautious optimism. If the next day went well, Lauren could begin her first steps toward recovery. Gabriel returned to the waiting room, finding Jade dozing in an armchair and Chloe asleep with her face pressed to the window, a mountain sunset turning her drawings gold and pink. He covered them both with a blanket and sat quietly, watching the sky change color. He thought of his own parents, long gone, and wondered if they would recognize the man he was becoming, someone who had finally learned that love was the greatest act of courage. Later that night, when everyone else was asleep, Gabriel sat by Lauren's bedside. Her eyes opened, and for the first time, she looked truly awake. "Why did you come?" she asked softly. He hesitated, searching for the words he'd never said. "Because I couldn't let you go." "Lauren, not again. Because Chloe needs her mother, and I need to try." Lauren's eyes glistened. "You're a good man, Gabriel. Even when you don't believe it?" He shook his head, voice trembling. "I'm just trying to do better." She smiled, a tired, hopeful smile, and squeezed his hand. "That's enough. For now." In the soft, uncertain light of the hospital room, Gabriel knew it was true. The weeks following Lauren's surgery moved in a blur of moments both small and monumental. Gabriel Foster found himself waking each morning with a quiet determination he hadn't known he possessed. The sterile white halls of the Zurich Biomedical Institute had become a strange sort of home, a place where hope and fear coexisted in every measured breath and every cautious step. Each day Lauren grew a little stronger, her pale cheeks flushing with life, her eyes clearer, though still fragile. She was learning to trust her body again, to listen to the rhythm of a heart that was not her own, but had become a part of her. Gabriel watched as Chloe blossomed in the hospital's pediatric playroom, her laughter ringing like a fragile bell through the halls. Jade stayed tirelessly by Lauren's side, a pillar of fierce love and quiet resilience. But beneath the fragile optimism, the shadows of their past still whispered, and Gabriel found himself wrestling with questions he hadn't dared ask before. One afternoon, as Lauren sat propped in bed with a warm blanket around her shoulders, Gabriel pulled up a chair beside her. The soft hum of the machines blended with the distant sounds of the hospital, a lullaby of life's persistence. Lauren reached out and took his hand. "Gabriel," she said softly, "why did you really come back? After all these years." He looked down, squeezing her hand gently. "Because I was wrong. About a lot of things. About us. About what matters." She studied him, her hazel eyes searching. "I raised Chloe alone because I didn't want you to be part of it. I thought you didn't care." Gabriel's throat tightened. "I was scared. Scared I wasn't enough. Scared I'd lose you if I tried." Lauren's lips trembled. "You lost time. Time I couldn't give back." "I know." His voice broke. "And I'm sorry. Every day. But I want to make it right." Their hands tightened, the silence between them heavy with years of pain and hope. Later that evening, Gabriel found himself alone in the garden courtyard outside the hospital. The night air was crisp, scented with spring blossoms. He pulled out his phone and stared at Chloe's smiling face in a photo she had sent earlier. Her innocence, her strength, were a beacon he didn't deserve. He thought of his own childhood, the empty rooms filled with silence, the distant love of parents who worked hard, but were never quite present. He understood now that love was more than a feeling, it was a choice, a daily act of courage. Gabriel's thoughts were interrupted by the soft approach of Jade. She sat beside him, her eyes reflecting the stars. "How are you really holding up?" he asked. She sighed, tired, but hopeful. "For Lauren, for Chloe, for us." Gabriel nodded. "I want to do more. When we go back, I want to be here for you all, not just as a visitor." Jade smiled faintly. "That means a lot." The days passed with progress and setbacks. Lauren endured physical therapy with a quiet determination, her body learning to accommodate the artificial heart that beat within her chest. The pain was real, but so was the will to live. Gabriel immersed himself in the small rhythms of care, helping Lauren sit up, encouraging Chloe's school lessons over video calls, organizing support from their friends and family. The world he had built on power and wealth seemed distant, irrelevant, compared to the fragile beauty of this new life. Yet, the ghosts of old wounds lingered. Gabriel often found himself staring at the ceiling in the dark, haunted by memories of the years lost to ambition, the choices that had driven Lauren away. He wondered if forgiveness was possible, not just from Lauren, but from himself. One night, as he sat beside Lauren's bed, she reached out and touched his face. "Gabriel," she whispered, "I'm scared." He took her hand, steady and sure. "Me too. But we're in this together." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're my family, and I'm here." Their shared vulnerability forged a bond stronger than any promise. As Lauren's strength returned, so did her desire to create. She began painting again, her brushstrokes tentative but filled with raw emotion. Gabriel arranged for a small gallery to showcase her work, a collection she called Brilliance, a testament to survival and love. One afternoon, while Lauren painted, Chloe ran through the sunlit garden outside, her laughter echoing. Gabriel watched, heart full, knowing that this family hope, second chances, was the true legacy worth building. The day before their departure, Gabriel and Lauren sat on a bench beneath blooming trees. He took her hands in his, eyes steady. "Will you marry me?" he asked simply. Lauren smiled through tears. "Yes. Let's write a new story." As the sun set behind the mountains, they stood together, ready to face whatever came next, united, hopeful, and alive. The morning light spilled softly through the curtains of the small apartment Gabriel had rented for Lauren, Chloe, and Jade during their extended stay in Zurich. It was a modest space, cozy, with warm wood floors and windows that framed the distant Alps like living paintings. Gabriel stood by the window, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the city slowly come to life below. For the first time in weeks, he felt a calm settle inside him, a fragile peace built on the promise of a second chance. Lauren was awake in the next room, her voice drifting faintly as she practiced speaking exercises recommended by her therapists. Each word, each breath was a small victory, a step toward reclaiming the life that had nearly slipped away. Gabriel smiled to himself, remembering how distant and fragile she had seemed just days before the surgery. Now, there was fire in her eyes, soft but real. Chloe was already at the kitchen table, coloring furiously with a rainbow of pencils spread before her. Her drawings had taken over every surface of the apartment, taped to the walls, stuck to the refrigerator, scattered across the floor. Each one told a story, moments of hope, family, and new beginnings. Jade entered the kitchen, brushing hair from her face, and greeted Gabriel with a tired but genuine smile. "Good morning," she said. "Lauren asked about you." Gabriel's heart lifted. "I'll be right there." In the living room. Lauren sat wrapped in a soft shawl, her fingers tracing the edges of a small canvas. She looked up as Gabriel approached, a quiet strength radiating from her. "Good morning," she said, voice steady. "Good morning," he replied, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said simply. "Every day, a little better." They sat together in companionable silence, the hum of the city below a gentle reminder of life moving forward. Lauren reached for her brush and dipped it into paint, beginning to sketch tentative lines. Gabriel watched, fascinated by the delicate way she coaxed color onto canvas, each stroke an expression of resilience. As the days passed, Lauren's recovery continued steadily. Physical therapy sessions grew longer and more challenging, but she met each with determination. Gabriel often accompanied her, offering encouragement and steady support. He saw the toll the surgery had taken, the lingering exhaustion and pain, but also the spark of life refusing to be extinguished. Chloe adjusted to the new rhythm of their lives with remarkable grace. School became her adventure, and she thrived with both a mother and father present a family she had longed for in her young heart. Gabriel marveled at her resilience, her ability to find joy in the smallest things, despite the weight they had all carried. One afternoon, Gabriel arranged a small gathering, a celebration of Lauren's progress and the promise of what lay ahead. Only a few close friends were invited, along with the medical team from Switzerland, who had cared for Lauren so tenderly. The gathering was intimate, filled with laughter and quiet conversations, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital halls where so much pain had been endured. Dr. Engel gave a brief toast, his voice warm and sincere. "We deal in science," he said, raising his glass, "but every once in a while, what saves someone isn't medicine, it's love." Lauren smiled, reaching for Gabriel's hand beneath the table. Chloe stood between them, holding a small basket of rose petals, when the officiant asked, "Who gives away the bride?" Chloe raised her hand proudly and declared, "I do. Because Daddy didn't buy Mommy a heart. He gave her his." A hush fell over the room, followed by soft laughter and tears. Gabriel bent down and hugged Chloe tightly, burying his face in her shoulder without care for who might see. Lauren's tears were of joy and relief, her smile the brightest thing in the room. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the lights dimmed, Gabriel and Lauren sat on their balcony, wrapped in blankets. The stars above were clearer than he had ever seen, the cool mountain air filled with the scent of pine and hope. "I don't know what comes next," Lauren whispered, "but I want you in it." Gabriel took her hand, his voice steady. "We're not just starting over. We're writing something entirely new." They sat together, watching Chloe dance barefoot in the grass below, her laughter ringing through the warm night air. The past was still there. It always would be, but it no longer held them hostage. It was simply the road that led them here, to this new life they had chosen, together. In the quiet moments between one heartbeat and the next, Gabriel understood what it truly meant to be alive, not because of wealth or power, but because the people who mattered most were beside him, breathing the same air, sharing the same future. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the curtains of their quiet home, nestled in the hills above Silver Springs. Gabriel Foster stood on the balcony, watching Chloe and Lauren move about the garden below. The crisp spring air was filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the gentle hum of life returning to normal after months of uncertainty and struggle. Lauren was steady now, her steps more confident, her laughter less fragile. The artificial heart within her chest had become not just a symbol of survival, but a testament to resilience and hope. She was painting again, filling canvases with bursts of color and light, each brushstroke a celebration of life reclaimed. Chloe, ever vibrant, darted between the flower beds, her braids bouncing with each carefree leap. She paused to show her father a dandelion she had plucked, its yellow petals shining like a tiny sun. "For Mommy," she said proudly. Gabriel knelt beside her, taking the flower gently. "She's lucky to have you." The words hung in the warm morning air, heavy with meaning. Inside, Lauren prepared breakfast, the kitchen alive with the aroma of fresh coffee and toasted bread. Gabriel joined her, their movements natural and easy after months of adjustment. The silence between them was comfortable, a space filled with understanding rather than uncertainty. Their journey had been anything but simple. The years of separation, the pain of abandonment, the terror of illness, all had carved scars too deep to ignore. Yet here they were, standing together, their fractured past slowly knitting into a new story. Gabriel reflected on the moments that had shaped them, the hospital corridors filled with quiet prayers, the midnight vigils, the endless waiting punctuated by fragile hope. He remembered the small hands that had reached for his, the drawings taped to hospital walls, the whispered promises made in the dark. He looked at Lauren, the woman who had once been a stranger and was now the heart of his life. Her smile was soft but sure, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and love. Later that afternoon, they gathered with close friends and family in their sunlit backyard. The air was warm, filled with the scent of blooming roses and fresh grass. Soft music played as laughter and conversation mingled beneath strings of fairy lights. Chloe led the way, scattering rose petals down the aisle they had created for a small, intimate wedding ceremony. The guests watched as Gabriel and Lauren exchanged vows, not grand declarations, but quiet promises rooted in truth and vulnerability. Gabriel spoke first, his voice steady. "I don't want to miss another moment. Not one more birthday, one more smile, or one more heartbeat. Lauren, will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making up for lost time?" Lauren's eyes glistened as she nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I want to write this new chapter with you together, as a family." Chloe stood between them, holding their hands, her smile radiant. When asked, "Who gives away the bride?" she lifted her chin and declared, "I do, because Daddy didn't buy Mommy a heart. He gave her his." Tears welled in many eyes as the ceremony closed with soft applause and gentle embraces. The night sky blanketed them in stars, a silent witness to the promises made and the love that had endured. Later, as the guests danced and the laughter softened, Gabriel and Lauren found a quiet moment beneath the glowing fairy lights. They held each other close, the weight of the past giving way to the lightness of a future shared. "We're not just starting over," Lauren whispered. "We're building something new, something real." Gabriel smiled, his heart full. "And it's the best thing I've ever helped build." The days that followed were filled with healing, laughter, and the slow but steady weaving of a family's fabric. Chloe's drawings adorned their walls, each a reminder of hope and the unbreakable bond they shared. Gabriel understood now that life's greatest gifts were not measured in wealth or power, but in moments of presence, acts of love, and the courage to embrace second chances. As the sun set over the hills, casting golden light across their home, Gabriel, Lauren, and Chloe stood together, breathing in the promise of tomorrow. Sometimes, the greatest miracles are not the ones we pray for. They're the ones we never believed we deserved. but receive anyway, as Gabriel Lauren. And Chloe's story shows us love can be the greatest medicine, but it's also a call to action against injustice and discrimination that so often shape who gets a chance to live and who doesn't. This powerful journey reminds us how cruel the world can be when bias interferes with compassion, and how healing begins when we open our hearts fully. Let this story be a reminder that every life is precious, and every family deserves a chance to heal, no matter their past or circumstance. We must stand together against prejudice and fight for a world where kindness, equality, and humanity are not exceptions, but the rule. Thank you for sharing this emotional journey with us. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that inspire, challenge, and heal. Stay with us, because the next story is just around the corner, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Remember, every heart deserves a chance to beat strong.